Hello, today we're going to look at marriage and family counseling. Okay, by the end of today's session, you'll be able to differentiate between family and friends. You'll know the most prevalent family types in the Caribbean and explore the family life cycle stages and issues that bring families to counseling, as well as review the process of family counseling. If we are always arriving and departing, it is also true that we are eternally anchored. One's destination is never a place, but rather a new way of looking at things. A quote by Henry Miller. Take a minute and tell me what this means to you. You can write it in the discussion board on e-learning. Family is the anchor that holds us through life's storms. That regardless of what you do in your life, there's a grounding that you've acquired from being part of your family, from experiencing your family and being embedded in your family that is always with you. And now I want you to take a minute and write down the first words that come to your mind when you see these images. I'm guessing that some of you put words down like love, joy, happiness, unity, legally binding, financial sharing, weddings, marriages, unions, ceremonies and rituals, events. A wedding is a collective name used for all the ceremonies and rituals that take place to give social acceptance to the relationship between two people, whereas marriage is the name of a lifelong institution, which starts after the wedding. A couple is two people in a relationship together. A wedding is an event. A wedding is not a marriage. Okay, a wedding is an event. A wedding is not a marriage. You can spend some time reflecting on that as well. And for those of you who are up to date on your pop culture, you'll know that Jeannie Mai Jenkins and Jeezy Jenkins, after 2 years, are now going through a divorce. And you would have seen they had a beautiful wedding during COVID. The wedding was a couple of days at the most. The marriages only lasted 2 years. So we have to recognize that a wedding, no matter how beautiful it is an event. And now I want you to write down the first words that come to your mind when you see these images. What do you think these images are examples of? Love, care, support, unity. But we also see anger, hurt, frustration, and confusion. A marriage is the name of a lifelong institution which starts after the wedding. Marriage is a socially or religiously sanctioned union between two adults for economic, social, and/or procreational reasons. Love is not simply a feeling or an emotion. It's not just words. You've probably heard the saying that love is a verb, and there's a lot of truth behind that. Love isn't something you can just say, it's something that you need to do. Therefore, love is action. the two become one. I want you to realize that two can never become one. We are individuals who have common interests, appreciate each other's views, and want to partner with each other for the remainder of our lives as a family unit, to which we may add our own children, friends, and pets, as well as form a bond between our respective families of origin. But we don't ever become one. We remain two individuals within a committed relationship. So what is a family? A family is a group of people who are bound by philosophical, religious, or other convictions. They have a common ancestry and generally live under the same roof. To quote Gladden, he says that a family is persons who are biologically and or psychologically related by historical, emotional, or economic bonds and perceive themselves as a part of a household. Okay, so they're a basic biosocial unit in society, having as its nucleus two or more adults living together and cooperating in the care and rearing of their own or adopted children. All right, and that's the definition by Cross 2014. As we're seeing in contemporary times, there are changing forms of family life. Traditionally, we have, or more familiar with, the extended family, all right, which is very similar to a multi-generational family. So a household that includes at least 3 generations. So normally grandparents, parents, and children. And then in the industrial age, what emerged was the nuclear family, which is this neat little subset of the extended family. And that involves the husband, or is comprised of the husband, the wife, and children. Husband, wife, and children. And they talk about 2.5 children, 2 children and a dog. Okay, that's what the theorists and researchers have claimed a nuclear family is. Then we have single parent families. And these are one parent's, in these type of single parent families, one parent is solely responsible for the care of not only themselves, but the children, okay, as well. We have blended families, which involve 2 people who are married, who have previously been married to someone else and have children from those previous marriages and now have come together in a union, bringing those children from their previous marriages into a new family. Okay, we have dual career families. This is where both marital partners work, where in traditional societies, you would have the husband going out to work and the wife remaining at home as a housewife and maintaining the household and looking after the children. We also have childless families. Okay, these are couples who do not have children, either by choice or biological factors or chance. And we have aging families. And this is where the heads of the households are 65 and above years old. And then, of course, we have gay or lesbian families. And these are families that involve same-sex couples, and they can either have or not have children. And finally, multicultural families. This is when individuals from 2 different cultures form a household. So we have a range of families. There are actually more than this nowadays, but these are the ones that we're most familiar with from the literature. Okay. So we know about the extended families, consists of at least 3 generations. These families are traditional type families that would have been very present in the English-speaking Caribbean over many years. As I said, with industrialization and modern times, there has been more leaning towards nuclear families, people going out and building and buying their own houses and moving their families away from the grandparents, the aunts and the uncles into their own unit. Very common in Barbados, for instance, are matrifocal families. So these are, if not only single parent families with the mother as the head of the household, but even multi-generational families with grandmother as at the head of the household, right? But there's very much a feminine focus on matrifocal family. And of course, the single parent family. We also have sibling families, okay? So families that maybe have lost parents early in life, of the young adult life, and they have formed a sibling family. So it's brothers and sisters looking after each other in one residence. Of course, they're foster families. When children are fostered, there's no direct biological relationship to the foster parents. but they raise them. We have common law or de facto unions. These are when people come together and live as though they're a married couple. They may have children in that union, and they live as though they're a married couple for 5 years or more to be given the label common law wife or husband. I mentioned the blended families. We also have visiting unions. These are families that do not reside, the husband and wife or the partners do not reside together. They normally live in their own family homes, but they travel between the two family homes. And more often it's the man that's doing the traveling between the family homes, and they share children who reside in one of the family homes. Okay, we have adopted families where families adopt children of their family. Okay. All right, and to look at them a little more in depth, you'll see that the single parent family is the most common family type in the Caribbean, and it's mainly headed by females, so it has that matrifocal focus. This family may come about because of divorce, death, desertion, or teenage pregnancy. The matrifocal family, approximately 35% of all households in the Caribbean are headed by women. In Barbados, that goes up to 44%. Okay. Furthermore, 54% of all separated or divorced women become female heads of households, with approximately 3 to 5 children, depending on the mother. Then the proportion of female-headed households in the Caribbean is rising. It's not reducing; it's actually rising. The extended family consists, as I mentioned before, of a mother and her children, other people, usually the family of the mother. And this kind of Caribbean family is common where mothers do not have the resources to rear their children on their own. They're also what we know as consanguineal families, which commonly consist of a husband and wife, their children, and other members of the husband's family. The visiting unions that I mentioned a little earlier, this is where men and women engage in love affairs while they're still in their parents' homes. If children result, they may develop into a visiting union where the two individuals live in separate residence while the child stays with its mother generally. And the visiting unions make up about 25% of mating relationships in the Caribbean and are more prevalent among low-income younger men. Also, mating couples reside with their families of origin and meet at a prearranged location to engage in sexual and social relationships. A significant percentage of women in these relationships see themselves as the head of the household, even though they're not in one household or residing in one household. So what kind of trends are we seeing as it pertains to families? We're definitely seeing an increase in divorce rates. We're seeing many more blended families. And again, even in popular culture, you're seeing this, of course, one of the most famous ones being the Kardashians at the moment. More women that are seeking employment, and some are the main breadwinner in the home. And women's rights movements have changed traditions and expectations for women. And there's an expansion of the lifespan development because people are living longer. So you may be getting some households with great-grandparents, grandparents, and parents under one roof, for instance. Okay, in terms of blended families, the simple definition of a blended family, also referred to or called traditionally a step family, or a reconstituted family, or even a complex family, is a family unit where one or both parents have children from a previous relationship, but they have combined to form a new family. The parents may be in a same-sex or heterosexual relationship and may not have children with each other. Now, the kind of issues that arise around this type of family involve becoming a new parent in a blended family and relationships between ex-partners and step-parents. It can take time for both families to get used to living together. This can be due to many factors, including different parenting and discipline styles, development of new relationships, and strong or conflicting emotions. Okay. I've mentioned these points, just have them there for you. All right, challenges children face in blended families. Children are often affected the most by joining a blended family. They have already gone through their parents' divorce, which would have been a great sense of loss that they would have experienced through that particular transition in life, then they must also adjust to a new parent and new rules in this blended family. Children may express like frustration through behavioral emotional outbursts. And you have many things to consider. You have the relationship between the child and the step parent, the relationship between the child and the step siblings, then visitation and parenting plans for the parent that doesn't live with them, as well as the grief and loss that the children are experiencing after the divorce. So it's a lot to consider. In terms of marriage and family counselling, it is a very popular speciality in the US and the UK, and it's becoming more so within our region. Persons are directly affected by how their family functions, okay? So you have to look at financial considerations, which give way to the economics of counselling as a couple or family as being more manageable, okay? So you pay less for two people than if you each go to individual counselling. The nature of marriage and family counselling is intrinsically appealing because you're in a setting where the couple may feel more comfortable speaking with each other because there's a third ear there. There is an objective person also participating in this relationship, aka the counsellor. Now, the main pioneers in family therapy are Nathan Ackerman in 1958. He was a New York City psychoanalyst, and he applied psychoanalytic practices to the treatment of families. Then we have Jay Haley in 1970, who was a dominant figure of the early family therapists, and Haley developed strategic family therapy and influenced structural family therapy. Okay, that you also hear names such as Virginia Satir, Salvador Minuchin, John Gottman, Carl Whitaker, and Milton Erickson, who also contributed largely to family therapy, family counseling. There are 4 major associations in America that are associated with family therapy. You have the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, which was established in 1942, the International Association of Marriage and Family Counselors, which is a division within the American Counseling Association, and that was chartered in 1986. There is Division 43, Family Psychology, in the American Psychological Association, that was formed in 1984. And then finally, there's the American Family Therapy Association that was formed in 1977. In terms of research findings, approximately 50% of all problems brought to counseling have been found to be related to marriage and family issues. Okay, so that's whether it's individual or group or couple therapy. At the base of it, they're related to marriage and family issues. Okay, so issues such as unemployment, poor school performance, spousal abuse, depression, rebellion, and self-concept issues. A number of interesting findings summarized by family counseling researchers are that family counseling interventions are at least as effective as individual interventions. Some forms of family counseling are more effective in treating problems than other counseling approaches. Effectiveness of family counseling increases when both partners or parents are present, and problems may worsen when marriage and family counseling services are not offered to couples conjointly or to families systematically. Clients report high satisfaction with marital, couple, and family counseling services in general. So you can see that, it's been found to be a very effective form of therapy. Now, family life and the family life cycle is what we center our practice on when we're looking at family therapy. The family life cycle involves the stages a family goes through as it evolves over the years. Okay, so as you move from raising babies to young children to adolescents to young adults, when they leave the home and you have the empty nest, right? That's the whole family life cycle as you go through. And as you're going through that as parents, you yourself are maturing and aging and going through the later stages of life as you reach retirement and so forth. All right. Family cohesion is a term that we use to relate to the emotional bonding between the family members. And family adaptability speaks to the ability to be flexible, the family as a unit to be flexible and to be able to adapt and change. Okay. And then there's enmeshment. Enmeshment, this is where family members are overly dependent on each other. right? So you can almost speak for each other because you're so enmeshed. And then there's triangulation, which refers to other members of a triangle who pull a person in two different directions, okay? So when a child is placed in the middle of a conflict between two parents and, parents are kind of pulling the child in two different directions, all right? Okay, so this again is straight from Gladden as it speaks to the family life cycle stages, just to kind of give you a visual that, you can refer back to. So we're starting with the individual who's leaving home, the single young adults, all right, which is probably where you all are kind of heading now after you finish studying, right? So there's the major task at this stage is you're disconnecting from your family and you're reconnecting with your family while being your own person. So you're disconnecting as a child and you're reconnecting now as a young adult and with your own identity, your own personhood. The final column here you're seeing is called second order changes in family status required to proceed developmentally. Okay, so what has to happen is that there has to be differentiation of self in relation to the family of origin. And there's also the development of intimate peer relationships. Okay, so you have closer relationships with people in with your peers. There's more trust built in those relationships and dependence in those relationships. Okay, then there's joining the families through partnership. So this is the adjustment and adaptation task that has to be achieved here. So there's formation of a partner system. So maybe you have a new boyfriend, a girlfriend, a fiance. There's realignment with family and friends to include the partner. So now you bring your partner to lunch at your parents', invite them to family parties or gatherings, and they're known as being your partner. Then you have families with young children. So you may go on to marry that partner maybe. And this involves accepting new members into the system because these little people, as well as your partner, are new members that work their way into the system. And they're looking here, adjusting the system to make space for children. Okay, so we're joining in child rearing and realignment with the family. Then we have families with adolescents, right? So here you're flexing the boundaries for children's independence and grandparents' frailties, because very often, as your children become adolescents, your parents have become grandparents. They're much more elderly, become much more frail, and starting to feel vulnerable. Okay, so you have a shift of relationships for adolescents to move on. There's a refocus on midlife career issues for the parents, and there's a shift toward caring for elders. Then we have launching children and moving on. So accepting exits from and entries to the family system, right? So here there may be a renegotiation of partnership as a dyad. There may be a realignment of relationships, may even involve bringing elderly parents into the residence, into your home, as well as sending children off to college or university, okay? You may also be dealing with disability and death, because at this stage, many of us may lose parents around this kind of stage. If not lose them, they have health challenges, which makes the responsibility of looking after them falls greater onto the parents. Then we have families in later life, and that major task there is accepting shifting generational roles, okay? So you're maintaining functioning while facing a sense of sentience. You're looking for support for more central role of middle generation, and you're dealing with loss. And very often here you're dealing with, once a man, twice a child. So seeing your parent age and the shifting in generational roles is that you become the parent of them, and you have to make decisions for them. You have to do their banking. So there's some of that we're seeing going on. So really the family life cycle speaks to the stages that a family goes through as it evolves over the years. And family life changes as we're going through this cycle, because by the time we get to the families as in later life, and our children have now become adults, within a few more years, the role and function of our children shifts, okay? All right, some families and family members achieve stage critical tasks before others. Olson talked about family cohesion and adaptability, All right. So family cohesion involves that emotional bonding among family members, and family adaptability is the ability to be flexible and change. All right. So I've got the cycle, the family life stage cycle outlined here for you. And we're going to start at the top with marriage and parenting and looking after these children, watching them become teenagers, and then watching them move on and start to develop their own family. All right. So one of the techniques that we used in family counseling when I was doing it many years ago was that if we would bring a family together and we would give them a task to do. Sometimes it'd be something like, we want you to create a menu, a Sunday lunch menu, which has food in that you all like, that you all can eat. And, you know, everybody would be happy with the meal after they've had it. What they actually come up with in terms of the menu is not important at all. What's important for the counselors to do is to observe the interaction so that you get an idea of the family dynamics. Okay, so you see who takes charge, you see who gets left out, you see who is indecisive, you know, so you get an idea about how this family works together, how they communicate, okay, which is very important to effective family counseling. You get an idea about the structure of the family, okay, how it works as a system. Expected life stresses in family, as you know, they're developmentally related to age and stage of life. There are also situational issues that arise, so interpersonal issues between individual members within the family. Some common stresses, of course, involve economics and finances, children's behaviors, insufficient couple time. So you hear people talk about date night now, communicating with children, insufficient personal time, insufficient family playtime. Okay, got those there for you. In terms of coping, how we can help families and parents cope within these expected life stresses is to help them engage in activities such as planning ahead and lowering their expectations. Okay, so for example, going out on date night once a month, so you get that sufficient, well, not sufficient, but you get some couple time over the none couple time that you're getting at the moment. All right, and giving your children personal time as well. Recognize that they too need time away from the family. That might involve sending them to the grandparents for a weekend or to a little camp for a few days, or whatever it may be. Okay. Unexpected life stresses. Now, timing is crucial to functionality, all right? And what I mean by that is that when things happen, can affect how the family functions, okay? So if suddenly a family member's involved in a fatal car crash, for instance, and they're hospitalized for a month or so, how the family manages that stressor, how that is also determined by where they are in their lives at that point in time. All right. We also need to look at family development and environmental fit. All right. So where they are in the stage development and the environment that they're in. Families have a special difficulty with happenstance and chance, or physical or psychological trauma and success and failure. Right. And we see this, we see this even at common entrance time. Regardless, even though you may have a full awareness of your child's abilities, when the results come out, if they're not what you expected, there's still can be a lot of friction around that. Okay. Other stresses involve gaining or losing a member, illness, job loss, or inherited money, or worse still, winning money. Okay. Most successful families, as has been found in the research, are functional, happy, strong. They're balanced and committed to each other. They appreciate each other. They spend time together. They have good communication patterns. They have a high degree of religious or spiritual orientation, and they're able to deal with crisis in a positive manner. Now, questions that help the counselor become more attuned to the family and couple functioning and dynamics, as suggested by Resnicoff, are looking at what is the outward appearance of the family, all right? How do they present? What repetitive or non-productive sequences are noticeable? What is the basic feeling state in the family and who carries it? What individual roles reinforce family resistance, and what are the most prevalent family defenses? How are family members differentiated from one another, and what are the subgroup boundaries? What part of the life cycle is the family experiencing, and what are its problem-solving methods? So you're really analyzing how the family is functioning, okay, and get an understanding of how that family works together. Couple or family counseling versus individual or group counseling. So individual counseling usually treats the person outside of his or her family, and couple or family counseling generally includes the involvement of the others, whether it's the other family members or the partner. Couple and family counseling sessions are similar to group counseling sessions in organization, basic dynamics, and stage development. Emphasis of couple and family counseling is generally on dynamics as opposed to linear causality, as in much individual and some group counseling. Now, counselors need to be aware of the different family stages as well as the developmental tasks of individual members. By becoming aware of depression, career indecisiveness, and substance abuse, for instance, you're able to work more effectively with the family. In terms of assessment should be based on the type of family and developmental stage of that particular family. And the terms that describe family dysfunction, I would have mentioned enmeshment and triangulation earlier. Enmeshment speaks to over-dependency on each other or undifferentiating. So you may as well all be one because you speak with the same voice. While triangulation speaks to family fusion, other members pull additional members in two different directions. Okay, that piggy in the middle kind of effect. And counselors need guidelines. They must not fail to act. They must not overreact. Okay, so they draw those guidelines from their observations of the family. All right, and so that they know how to work within that family. Marriage family counseling versus individual group counseling. In terms of the similarities, there's some shared theories, and both recognize the family role in the individual's life. Both focus on problem behaviors and conflicts between the individual and environment. Both are developmental in their perspective. Counseling sessions are similar in organization, basic dynamics, and stage development, and both have interpersonal emphasis. In terms of the differences, some theories are unique to marriage and family counseling, such as Bowenian family therapy and structured family therapy, okay, or systems therapy. Individual counseling treats the person outside the family, all right? While with marriage and family therapy, it includes the involvement of other family members in the counseling. And with marriage and family therapy, the aim is to resolve issues within the family in order to help individual members, all right? And family members are not equal in status and power. Families may perpetuate myths, whereas groups are usually more objective. So it's just a group of people that don't know each other. They're much more objective than families in therapy, because families have a history, and it's much easier to perpetuate myths and stories that have gone on and on within a family. Family members carry more emotional baggage. Okay, and marriage and family therapy has emphasis on dynamics. Individual and some group counseling focus on a linear causality, right? Now, we usually think of causality as linear in individual counseling, and that is that one cause has one effect, okay? The scientific method attempts to isolate one cause and one effect to establish lines of causality. Now, sometimes causality is not linear, all right? It's important to recognize that. There are different reasons that families enter counseling, right? And the terminology that we use in family counseling are that we have the identified patient, who's known as the IP, and that's the individual who is seen as the cause of trouble within the family structure. Now, most family counselors do not see one person as the problem, but rather the whole family system, okay? And there's also the ripple effect. We're working with one family member in the hope that changes in this individual will positively impact a family, all right? Most family counselors operate from a general systems framework. They view the family as an open system that evolves through the family life cycle in a socio-cultural context. And functional families follow rules, but they're still fairly flexible. And family systems counselors stress circular causality. And to show you what that circular causality looks like, a dance of pursuit and distance. We have Mary. We're going to start here. Mary asks Stan a question, hoping to restore the feeling of connection. She doesn't feel connected to her husband, Stan. Okay. And what Stan feels when Mary questions him is that Stan feels intruded upon and responds by stonewalling, blank facing, poker facing. Okay. Then Mary feels abandoned by Stan's stonewalling and feels compelled to understand Stan's thoughts. All right. So therefore, she'll ask more questions, and you're caught in this circular. You're caught in this circular relationship or dynamic, really. Okay, where things are not getting better; they're actually getting worse because of how the communication is being interpreted by the members. Right. So, okay, move on. Sorry about the slide mishaps there. So with systems theory, a person is himself or herself in the context of relationships. The usual focus on a person's feelings, thoughts, and internal struggles will not reveal the relationship forces that create distress or health, okay, or ill health, I should say. A relationship is governed by feedback or circular causality, in which each person continually responds to the other in predictable ways that sustain patterns of it in the system, which you saw with Stan and Mary just now. All right. So you have here, this is by Balswick and Balswick. It's a Christian perspective of on a contemporary home, but you'll see that you have the wider family system here, right around, and then within that you have the parental subsystem of the husband and wife, and you have the sibling subsystem of whether it's son, daughter, sons, or daughters here. Okay. And within the families, from the family system, you get input into the family system. You get people that come into the family who are not in the family, could be friends, colleagues from work, and you get the output from the environment. Okay, which is how you respond to them, how the family feels about them. That's what is your output. Okay, so a person is himself or herself in the context of relationship. Right, as I said, the usual focus is on a person's feelings, thoughts, and internal struggles. That focus that we use in individual counseling will not reveal the relationship forces that create distress within the family system. All right. So we have to look within the system and look to see what's happening in terms of the circular causality. It's not always a linear process. Now, systems theory, the problems that originate in the family and are perpetuated by relationship dynamics. So we have solutions can be found in changing relationship dynamics. That's what the counselor is working towards. And we also look at systemic change that can occur by intervening or restructuring the patterns of interacting between members. Now, all families face two types of stresses: their developmental stresses and their environmental stresses. All right. Families in distress are not sick, but have been unable to adjust to the stresses. All right. So a distressed family is often unwilling to take responsibility, interprets problems from a linear causality perspective rather than a circular perspective, which means that they're always blaming an individual. Okay. Suffers a confusion of levels in terms of who's the child and who's the parent, forms coalitions. So a parent and a child may form a coalition against another parent, and appoints children to quasi-adult roles. A child taking on the role of one parent's confidant, for example. Those are signs of a distressed family. Rules, values, and language matter. That's what we've found in families, that they really do matter. Families have rules that determine how balance is reinstated after they have been distressed or had to deal with something big. If something violates those rules, then one of two things happens. Either the members reassert the rules, or the family changes the rules, okay? Now, families have values that assign meaning to various events. So it's important to understand those values in working with families, okay? Values are a function of family and cultural origins, and ways of describing people and situations that reflect their values and rules. They have specific ways of doing that. And it's important to understand how family uses language in order to effectively reframe when a more positive viewpoint is possible. Okay, so we're now going to take a step-by-step approach to family therapy. All right, and starting with the initial phase. Right, the initial phase involves inviting the entire family to the session. And then you have to engage in what we call joining and building. And this is really the counselor joining the family, building that trust within the family, and understanding that this is a collaborative relationship. We're in this together, we're working together. Then there's assessing the problem from multiple perspectives, from the perspectives of each of the family members, assessing family rules, values, language patterns, and goals. Okay, and you're using a teleological lens. You're looking towards the future, how things are going to be better, how we're going to do things differently. And assessing cultural issues through a multicultural lens, and family of origin for patterns across the generations. Okay, so very often what we've found in family counseling is that there are patterns of behavior that are repeated from generation to generation. And one of the key tools that's used to re-identify this is a genogram. Okay, and that's a pictorial depiction of the family. Okay, and the family across a few generations. In terms of pre-session planning, matters that are addressed before counseling begins are things like the reason the caller for the initial session is seeking therapy. It may not match the reasons of everyone else to seek or not seek counseling. The counselor obtains essential clinical information, problem description, and content information. So that's really some background information on the family, if there are any, major health concerns, if anybody's suffered with mental illness before, that kind of thing. The counselor listens for what is, as well as what is not being conveyed by that initial caller, and begins to form hypotheses about the issues. Okay, and then, of course, the appointment is scheduled for the whole family. Then we have the interventions, right? So you're observing or tracking interactional patterns and asking process questions, which is very Bohemian family therapy. So this educates the family about circular causality, as well as you encourage the individual members to take the I position when they're sharing information. And this position encourages taking responsibility and ends the blaming of other individuals. Okay, so I felt neglected when Annie said X, Y, and Z, and Peter responded in this way. Okay, so it's about the individuals feeling within the family. And secondly, observing and encouraging typical dynamics through enactments. And this is a process or a technique, I should say, that was founded by Minuchin. Okay, so the therapist may use what we call reframing, which is a stroke and a kick, also known as a stroke and a kick, where you're taking something that's been said very negatively from one of the family members, and you're reframing it in a more positive light. Okay, oh, she's always nagging after me about this, that, and the other. Oh, you mean that she shows that she cares through, reminding you about the things that you have to do. Okay, so you're reframing it. And then assigning tasks, looking at boundary adjustments. All right, so if the case is that the child has become parental in some way, and looking at kind of readjusting that boundary so that they return to being a child within the family, and eliciting and supporting competencies. All right, finding out what the individual members are good at and supporting them in those and using them to strengthen the family. Now, the first few sessions are the most critical in predicting success, according to Odell and Quinn. Those first few sessions provide a means in which a counsellor evaluates how the family is functioning and what may need to be done to help them. All right. So you want to get off to a good start. You do this by building rapport with each family member and the family as a whole. So you're establishing that relationship just as you would with the individual, but you have a whole group to work with. You build a therapeutic alliance through what we call maintenance. So the counsellor supports the family member's position. You use tracking. The counsellor tracks a sequence of events, and mimesis. This is when the counsellor adopts the family style or tempo. All right. So it's almost like you're becoming a member of the family in a way, and that's what you're doing. And then there are therapeutic alliances that involve a frame, okay, a perspective on how individuals view the presenting problem, the person or situation, and then you're going to help them to reframe, to change the frame, and take a look at it in another way, take a look at the whole situation in another way. You're reframing it. All right, the counselor's role. The counselor acts as an observer. Okay, so it looks for the family dance and the way the family typically interacts on verbal or non-verbal levels. So go back to the example I gave you much earlier in terms of giving them a task to do that they all have to have a level of satisfaction with, such as creating the Sunday lunch menu. The only aim of that task is to look at the family dance, is to be able to analyze how this family dance is, who holds the power, who's the gatekeeper, who's the baby, that's what you're looking at. And then scapegoating, this involves blaming an individual for the family's problems, all right? They may also probe and challenge the family members' perceptions of events and of others, all right? So the counsellor clarifies what is happening in the family. They ask circular questions that focus attention on family connections and highlight differences among members. They look for triangulation, where that third person is being drawn into a dyadic conflict. And the counsellor develops capacity to draw initial conclusions about the way the family behaves. All right. They form tentative goals are set and a return appointment is made. Now, so in the middle phase of marriage, couple, and family counselling, sessions between the initial sessions and termination, where needed, changes are made by the family. All right. So time in which new behaviors are explored and chances are taken occur during this time. The counsellor stays active mentally, verbally, and behaviorally. They make links with the family, between the family and outside agencies, such as, Alcoholics Anonymous, for instance, if that's a need. Or the focus is continuously on the process of what is happening within the family, okay? And the easiest changes usually come first. So we reach for what we call the lowest hanging fruit first. The counsellor pushes the family into changing cognitions, affective responses and behaviors, and looks for evidence of stability of change. Okay, it gives the family homework outside of the sessions, because this keeps the family engaged as well as making progress. And they also use psychoeducational assignments like reading a book, helps the family learn more and interact together, like self-help books, for instance. Okay. Restructuring concepts. Okay, so families have hierarchies, and very often the counsellor has to support parents, especially when there's a breakdown in relationships with, for instance, teenage children or adult children. Okay, help the parents to regain their status within the family. So insulating parents from their own families of origins also has to occur sometimes, as well as insulating parents from children. Establishing direct communication or detriangulating is also something that has to occur very often, as well as nurturing competencies through reframing symptoms as strengths and assigning tasks, okay, and redefining relationships one-to-one with the family of origin. Some more family therapy concepts, family counseling concepts, are non-summativity. This is that the family is greater than the sum of its parts. Equifinality, which is that the origin may lead to different outcomes, and outcomes may result from different origins, okay? Communication, content, factual information, and relationship, how the message is understood, are very important facets of communication. The what of a message is conveyed by how it is delivered, okay? Family rules are explicit and implicit, okay? There's the redundancy principle. This is a small set of predictable rules. That's a given. Then there are morphogenesis, which are here family modification of its functioning to meet changing demands. And it requires a second order change, make a new response rather than a first order change. Okay, and then of course we have homeostasis, which is a steady, stable state of equilibrium within the family. Right, I mentioned genograms easier as being one of the main assessment tools that are used within family therapy. They're used to help detect intergenerational patterns of family functioning that impact the present. And you can do one right now for your own family. You can draw 3 generations of the family, include their names, their dates of birth, their marriage, separations, marital status, whether they're married, separated, or divorced, along with the current age and occupation. You can use this one, which some of you may be familiar with, as a guide. The different shapes mean different things. So you'll see the square means man, the circle means woman, A is for adultery, and you go through the 2 lines are divorce. So if you look here, for instance, you'll be familiar with, for instance, Princess Diana and Prince Charles, they were divorced, so they got the 2 lines. They both committed adultery. Diana's a woman, Charles is a man. Okay, then this star is indicating that, we've seen some patterns. Okay, so this star here says great-grandmother of Camilla Parker Bowles, Alice Keppel, was the mistress to Prince Charles's great-grandfather, King Edward VII. So that's a pattern that's repeated, a multi-generational pattern that has repeated itself. Okay, but we can see that there's lots of adultery in this family. There are lots of, there's a fair amount of divorce. We're seeing a few divorces here. And you're seeing a pattern here. Diana came from a divorced parents. She's experienced divorce herself. The same thing with Sarah Ferguson and her parents, okay? The process of marriage, couple, and family counselling is based on several premises, okay? That persons conducting the counselling are psychologically healthy and understand their own families of origin. This prevents counsellors from contaminating sessions with their own family life. That counsellors will balance the therapeutic process, for instance, not worrying about making everyone happy, but keeping members involved. That the counsellor wins the battle for structure while letting the family win the battle for initiative. All right, the battle for structure involves establishing the parameters of counselling, such as how often they will meet, for instance. Most of what we go through in the role induction with individual counselling, while the battle for initiative is the motivation to make needed changes within the family, from the family's perspective. Family counsellors need to be able to see the couple or family difficulties in the context in which they are occurring. Okay, so they need to be developmentally sophisticated on family and individual life, have a good understanding and knowledge of the family life cycle, and have life experiences themselves. Okay. In terms of termination, the final phase of treatment may be initiated by the family, the counsellor, or both. It should not be sudden or seen as the highlight of counselling. It provides closure and is a means of assessing whether goals have been achieved. The counsellor makes sure progress is summarised and celebrated so that the family feels stronger. Long-term goals are set that gives family members something to think about and plan out. Predicting setbacks provides awareness so that families do not become too upset if they do have a setback. And follow-up conveys care and lets families know that they can return to counselling to finish anything they began or to work on other issues. And families realise that their progress is being monitored. J. Haley, 76, said, all clinicians must deal with marriage in some way because everyone is either married, planning to be married, or avoiding marriage. Okay, these are the references that we use for much of today's lecture. And you can click on those links and gain more information. And thank you for listening. I hope that you do the activities. I hope that you especially do the genogram and look to see if you're seeing any multi-generational patterns in your family. Thank you.